Hello there and welcome to WRC 9. Today I figured I'd give my first impressions, although it's more of a review at this point, or sort of a free-form review, I guess, because it's not really scripted, this. It was supposed to be a first impressions video. I figured I'd get to a point in the career mode where I got to the mainline WRC cars, so I could give a much more fair review of the game after a good couple of hours, and I have now done that twice. We'll get to that in a minute. But I figured I would offer my opinion on this game because I like WRC games. Historically, I've been playing through the Evolution Studios games recently. They're a massive blast, love those, and I always have really enjoyed watching rallying. I love the challenge of rally. I don't really follow it so much these days in the sense that I watch every single event, but I do certainly keep my ear to the ground in cases of what's happening, so that's a good thing. Another reason why I am doing this video is because I've bought this with my own money. A lot of the videos of this game on the internet, and there's nothing wrong with this whatsoever, the copies have been supplied to the creators by Kyloton. They've had early access builds and so on and so forth. Nothing wrong with that. You can absolutely be critical of a game that you have been given. However, there's always sort of going to be that thing in the back of people's minds that's telling you there's bias towards it, and you know, to some subconscious level there always will be. So let's get into this. WRC 9 had quite a lot of hype behind it, I guess. Kyloton have taken over the WRC franchise. I believe they took over as of WRC 5. WRC 5, again, I'd say, you know, Rally Evolved existed. And the problem with these games is they restarted back up in 2010 with, I can't remember the name of the developer, but they were not well received. And to be honest with you, until about WRC 8, they weren't. These games were seen as pretty throwaway, pretty sorry excuses when it comes to the WRC license, which has always been a shame to people because, you know, rallying games previously have been really good. The Colin McRae Rally series is very fondly remembered, as are the Evolution Studios PlayStation 2 exclusive rally games. Of course, there's others, Tommy Mackinnon Rally, so on and so forth. So, it's always been a bit of a shame, but after WRC 8, it looked like it was bouncing back strong. Don't get me wrong, WRC 8 had its issues, but they've aimed to iron some of those out with WRC 9. And one of the big things that was exciting me is they were showing that they were offering much more of a focus on realism. That's what they were going for here. You know, they've got steering wheel support, they've been hyping up the fact that esports players and actual real rally drivers have been testing this, and they're pretty much equal in terms of their pace, which is remarkable, really. You know, WRC 8 handled well, but it wasn't quite there. So I was excited for this game to see how it handles. In my opinion, the best handling rally game, the best rally game I probably ever played, in all honesty, is Dirt Rally 2.0. The career and everything is all very wishy-washy, but in terms of the base, driving a car through a rally, Dirt Rally 2.0 is the game I'm going to compare this to a lot, which is fair because they are pretty sort of close competitors. So, let's talk WRC 9 after all that rigmarole. This is a fully licensed game based off the WRC season, and unlike in, say, Dirt Rally 2.0, that certainly does come with some benefits. You get all 15 of the locations that were supposed to be featured in the 2020 rally season. Obviously, that has been sort of all thrown into the air with COVID-19, so the calendar has been changed. There's certain rallies that have been added that just aren't in this game. Estonia, although I believe they've said they're going to add Estonia in a free update at some point. But essentially, all 15 rallies, including some new locations that showed up on the calendar for this year. For example, the return of Rally Kenya, which is incredibly exciting. Turkey, I believe that's another new one as well. Yeah, a lot of stage variety, a lot of country variety, and yeah, you know, you get your tight technical stages, you get the flat-out snow-ridden slow-ridden stages of Sweden, which I like a lot. And yeah, in Kenya, you know, wide open, wildlife, all that sort of jazz. Finland, very quick, obviously. Turkey, once again, very technical, very hard on the car as well. Japan, that's one of the new ones as well. That's sort of a asphalt all rally which I'm not a huge fan of. So, a lot of choices when it comes to locations. Again, more than Dirt Rally 2.0, it has to be said. Car choice is also another area of this game where it both benefits and also doesn't from the WRC license. So, having a full WRC license means you can actually feature the mainline WRC cars. The problem in terms of a video game is there's currently only 3 manufacturers in WRC. You have Ford, Hyundai and Toyota. Citroen have pulled out, Volkswagen pulled out ages ago before that. There just is not a lot of manufacturers who are building mainline WRC cars. So, as a result, yeah, you essentially only have 3 cars at the top line of WRC. But that's how it is. And again, in the Evolution Studios WRC games, the first one of that only offered 7 cars, I think, and they were the 7 cars that were actually in WRC. Of course, to offset that, you do get the WRC2 and WRC3 cars. As far as I'm aware, this is all of the cars that were competing or were due to compete in the 2020 season. WRC2 are the manufacturer-backed cars. So, of course, we have Hyundai Motorsport N, Citroen still have an R5 team, Ford Fiesta R5, and the Skoda. There's also another R5 in the form of the Volkswagen, which apparently does not have a manufacturer team, but it's driven by people with names I can't pronounce. Yeah, as you can see, a lot more variety in the WRC2, WRC3 cars, as you would expect. You also have all the junior WRC teams, which is basically the thing before WRC3. This is where they attempt to get you to start in the career mode, although you do have a choice of skipping this and going straight to WRC3. More on that in a minute. There's a lot of more on that in a minute. She's quite attractive. Anyways, also, as a sort of a thing to expand on WRC8, you have Legends cars. These are cars you can drive in the career for one-off events, or you can choose to go into quick play and drive these. As you can see, a decent range of cars. You know, you've got 70s cars, you've got 80s cars, 90s, 2000s, and of course the Polo. There's a good variety here. I believe there's 15 overall. No, there isn't. There's 10. They say 15. There's 10. Ignore them. But, of course, there's some pretty notable things missing here. If you are going to implement Legend cars, that's where you can sort of open yourself up to criticism, because they don't have to, you know, they are only here to represent the 2020 season of WRC. However, if you are going to offer Legend cars, especially a selection like this, don't get me wrong, a selection that's good, but people are going to moan because there's various, you know, sort of cars that are missing here. There's no Subaru Imprezas, no Mitsubishi Evos, trying to think of other cars that exist, no Citroen C4, which was, you know, the most successful rally car of all time. They have the second most successful, Lancia Delta. I will give them credit for adding the Zara in, because a lot of rally games like to forget the Zara exists, and this thing was a powerhouse when it first got introduced. You can sort of see them all in this little mode here and watch them go through different weather and stuff like that and hide the interface. It's actually, yeah, the game's quite pretty. Pretty in certain areas. Well, yeah, we'll go with that. Much to its detriment at times. Again, we'll get to that. But as I said, you know, there's some good variety here. The Ford Focus, this 2007 Focus, you barely see that anymore. This car was second overall in 2007, I believe, only just losing out to Sebastian Loeb in the hands of Marcus Gronholm. The 99 Corolla, that is a limited edition car, but even still, you don't see this thing in, say, Dirt Rally 2.0. And I will give them credit in that regard. They've gone for a few cars that just aren't in Rally 2.0, so there is, again, another reason to play this game, so you can drive the Zara and stuff like that. But if you want to drive historical rally cars, obviously that's where you'd go to drive them, because that game has a far bigger selection. You know, Group B all-wheel drive cars, Group B rear-wheel drive cars, 80s cars, 90s cars, the GT rally cars, all sorts. And then you have bonus as well, which is the old Citroen C3, which is being used as a test car currently for various things in WRC. So that's the car that I guess you could have driven in WRC8 if you wanted to. There's a Porsche if you want to drive that, and then there's a Proton thing. I've never really understood why this is sort of a thing. I figured Proton would have entered. I could have swore there's a Mitsubishi R5 as well, but I don't know if that just doesn't exist in this world here. But Yeah, so as far as having the actual cars represent the 2020 season, good. If you want more variety in terms of Legends cars, not so much. That's a rant, we'll go off that. Let's actually go into the actual driving, and I guess we'll wrap the career mode into this as well. So, the career mode, much like WRC 8, you do have the option to cut most of this out, going through, I can't remember what it's called, Season Play I believe, but I'll just show off the mainline career here. Much like in WRC 8, there is a sort of team management aspect to this game, a very light one. Admittedly, you can cut it all out, it's a little bit annoying, but it isn't invasive, it isn't particularly hard to understand how this stuff sort of works, so it's hardly a detriment to the game if you decide to, you may as well just play through it this way, instead of using Season Play. That's basically what I'm trying to explain. But, as you can see, you have a calendar where you can select events, so the next one's Rally Sweden, and then on the days, or these are weeks technically, where you don't have a rally going on, you can select a different event. You can rest, which makes your crew members all gain their stamina back up, because those, they do deplete stamina as rallies go on. You can do extreme conditions, which is like a sort of, they put you in a damaged car, put you in ridiculous weather conditions, you have to drive from one point to the next. Maintenance races, this is something you have to deal with in WRC 2 and WRC. I wish you didn't, but essentially you have a car condition gauge, you'll see it in the bottom corner there, it's sort of midway in, and that will deplete as you damage the car in rallies, and so you have to just drive those to get it back up. A little bit weird. And then there's training missions, which don't really matter. Other than that, you can participate in historic races, which is, again, where you drive some of those historic rally cars. There's manufacturer challenges and tryouts as well, which basically gets you more affinity with a team, and eventually you'll be able to transfer team, which is what I did to end up getting into this Toyota. That's why I've had to start this career twice, because I really wanted to get into this Toyota. Yeah, in WRC 8, the way it worked is you played through the entire season in your WRC car, or WRC 2, WRC 3, whatever it was, and at the end of the season you'd get to pick a contract. That worked, and then you could step up to the next class of rally, or you could continue on. However, in this game, it railroads you into, you don't get a selection of contracts. Essentially, towards the end of the season, you get put into the manufacturer tryouts, and then you have to try out in that car. So, for example, you try out in the Toyota, you try out in a Hyundai, try out for a Ford, whatever. You try out in those, and then if you win, you get offered a contract. But you can't, you know, get to the end of the season and then sign the contract. You have to sign the contract there and then. That bothers me, because if you don't want to do, you know, if you don't want to be railroaded into signing into a thing and you just want a choice of which ones you want, well, tough luck, because if you get to the end of the season, it turns out you can only sign up to driving WRC 2 again, and you've lost all your progress. It's a bit bollocks in that. I'd much rather have the WRC 8 system, but I'll show off a bit more in here. You have an R&D tree, where essentially you can put things into, you can put your research points that you gain through leveling up. You gain a point every experience level, and then you can just put that into this. So, for example, you can put a reliability point in, crew, team, and performance. I'm not a huge fan of the performance one. If you tout yourself as a simulation game, I don't really like the idea that you could upgrade your car through skill points, but that's by the by. That's what they've gone with. I recommend the crew one, really. Reliability, I put stuff into reliability, but my car gets wrecked either way, so there's no real point on that one. Crew management, you have to manage a crew of 6 team members, the 6 vital areas, and you unlock these over time. It's not too bad to manage these guys. Eventually they get too tired and you have to put new ones in their place. Mailbox doesn't really matter. And then objectives. These are irritating as fuck, I'll be perfectly honest. So for example, you can see here, short-term objective, do not spend more than 35 minutes on repairs in the next rally. Well, you need all 45 minutes that you get to repair the car, so that one goes out the window. There's another one as well where you can't use a certain compound tyre. You're better off just ignoring those. Statistics, which don't really matter. Driver stand things, I got second in Monte Carlo, so there you go. You can go to a test arena where you can just sort of free roam and drive the car around, which is quite cool. And then there's a little tutorial thing there, which is pretty cool. There's something else in here as well. I'm trying to... Ah, there we go. Manufacturer reputation, so you can see sort of how well viewed you are with each manufacturer. For whatever reason, I end up getting a really bad reputation with my WRC 3 because I started out in the Hyundai in this playthrough and then went to a Ford. Apparently I've got bad standings with both of those, but I think it's because I was trying out for other teams. Yeah, without further ado, let's actually get into a rally so we can talk about handling, stage design and overall performance of this game. I've actually waited until Rally Sweden for this because I feel like Rally Sweden I know very, very well. So I should be able to be pretty good at this, despite the fact that I've got no audio whatsoever. Right. Also, another thing which is quite cool, you might have seen it, I forgot to show it off, you can select your difficulty now depending on each rally. Before, the way in WRC 8 it works is each time you signed a new contract you had to choose difficulty and your damage level, and you couldn't change it after that, which was really bad, because some stages are really easy and other stages aren't, whereas in this game it gives you the option to change. That being said, I've basically stuck mine at like 100% the entire time and just gone from there. I think my damage I've sort of switched between medium and yes, low and medium. I don't really go for realistic damage because wear and tear damage in this game is really harsh and I'm not good enough for that. I also don't go for the perma-crash feature because I need as many restarts as I can get. So, let's talk handling. Handling is improved from WRC 8. So, most of the handling, realism thing, obviously this game has been developed much more with a steering wheel in mind. I did try to play WRC 8 a little bit on a steering wheel, but quite frankly I'm nowhere near good enough with my steering wheel at the moment, so I can't really offer you much in terms of that. I'm just too bad to really give a relative review of using a steering wheel in terms of, what's realistic, what isn't, and yeah, I'm definitely not good enough to drive a rally game with that, so unfortunately I can't really offer you much insight for a wheel. On controller, what I can say is this does drive better in some aspects than WRC 8, and in some aspects basically the same really. The cars do feel like they do have a little bit more weight to them, which was a big issue in WRC 8. The cars felt very, very light. Admittedly, they still do feel quite light in this game. They don't feel like they've got as much weight as they would have in, say, Dirt Rally 2.0. Sorry to bring it up again, but yeah, they don't feel quite that weighty, which is a bit of a shame. They are a little bit easier to control than they are in that game, but then again, you are driving essentially exclusively R5 cars and WRC cars. There's definitely differences in the way each car drives, especially in terms of the classifications. The R5 cars I find are actually much harder to drive than the WRC cars. They don't offer the same amount of grip. You don't get the same amount of confidence in the R5 cars, well as these things with the ridiculous aero packages and so on. It feels really night and day when you switch between driving the two, and to be honest with you, that's one of my big issues in terms of the career mode in this game is, at the start you get the choice. You can start out in Junior WRC or go up to try out for WRC 3, as you could in previous games in WRC 8. The problem with that is I don't really want to drive the R5 cars, because I just want to play, I want to play with the full-fat WRC cars, and I feel like if you're going to offer me the choice of, whether I want to start out in Junior WRC or WRC 3, you may as well go all whole hog and say, right, do you want to start out with big mainline WRC cars, especially if you played through WRC 8, because it's a very similar career mode. They haven't changed all that much. You do rallies, you gain manufacturer affinity, and then eventually you get to break away and move into the next category of rally. And it's all very similar, even though menus look very similar. So I do really wish they would have given you the option to just start out in WRC cars, but that's sort of a minor little gripe on my end. But handling is, going back to it, that was a bit of a roundabout way to go to there, but yeah. In terms of handling, definitely improved, definitely more drivable. I do have to say I've turned the ABS on, because the ABS works a little bit weird on controller. It feels like the rear brakes just sort of lock up, and that's just send you into a tailspin. So for one of the first times ever in a game, I've turned ABS on in the case of this game, and ever since then it's driven a lot better. I'm doing pretty awful at this stage, and I'm like 20 seconds ahead, so yeah, Rally Sweden. Either I'm really good at Rally Sweden or the AI is really bad at Rally Sweden. I know I got my arse kicked in Monte Carlo by Alt Tank, so yeah, that was not so good. Yeah, if handling was one of your big worries, you can be rest assured to an extent. If you found WRC8 really bad to drive, chances are it's probably worth playing a demo of this before you full fat pick it up, just in case. Because, to be honest with you, the handling hasn't improved that much, but yeah, it's still not bad. And if they claim it's realistic on a wheel and full, you know, like actual rally drivers are fine, much more competitive with the esport drivers this time around, then I can't disagree with that. They obviously must be doing something right. Yeah, we won that by quite a while. So, that's handling. Handling, not too bad. Let's put it that way. So, let's move on to actual stage design. And we'll get into some of my negatives. I'm going to try and sort of set this video up with timestamps to go to various different points. The actual stage designs are pretty good, it has to be said. Of course, it is an actual licensed WRC game. I believe each rally has about 10 routes in it, and that is good and bad. So, the stages themselves, first time you drive through them, are really good. They're very accurate to what the real life stages are. I don't think they're quite as long as most real life stages are, but they definitely offer, they're sort of like snippets of little stages, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And if you watch them on television, you'll see them, or in my case, if you played Dirt Rally 2.0, you might see some of the routes, especially in Monte Carlo. You'll recognise various bits and bobs, so that's quite good. So the stage design is good. Stages are challenging, but the problem is with there only being 10 stages and the fact that you have to play through this game in a WRC 3 car, and then a WRC 2 car, and then a mainline WRC car, and, you know, there's 4 stages per rally each in WRC 2 and 3, and then it steps up to 6 for mainline WRC. You will see these stages over and over again, and eventually you end up learning them. And, you know, some of the fun of Rally is the unpredictability of going through stages and so on. So, it can be a little bit tricky there, and a lot of the stages are simply reversed versions. Or sorry, they're either reversed or extended versions. So, for example, this stage here, this little 5-kilometer blast through this sort of snowy jungle, this will be part of a, say, 16-kilometer route later on, and then that same 16-kilometer route has a reverse version, and then you'll drive through it in that. You'll begin to recognise stages and so on a lot, and again, you know, maybe that's a good thing in terms of a video game, you know, getting to learn these things, but the problem is, you know, real-life rally drivers, sure, they drive through the same stages over and over again, but you know, they have like a year to forget them, and new challenges always arise. And these, don't get me wrong, they do have stage degradation, stuff like that. But even still, you know, you've driven this before, you sort of know what's going to happen, and, you know, it could be hours between, you know, next time you play Rally Sweden and the first time you play Rally Sweden, so that is a bit of an issue in terms of stages. I would like to see more stages. Of course, what everyone really wants is like a full-on realistic rally game where you go through 3 days and drive, you know, 4,000 miles and so on, but obviously that's not possible, and it would be far too hard for me because I find it hard to keep the car intact through like a 5-mile stage, let alone some of the 20-mile stages, because unlike Dirt Rally 2.0, this game does have, you know, giant, I think the longest stage I've seen is 23 kilometers. It takes about 15-20 minutes to drive through some of them. They can get long, they can get really long, and they do have interchangeable weather during the entire time, so yeah, definitely keep your wits about you, because the stages here can get long. If you want my advice, never really select soft tyres, because soft tyres will always wear out. I find, as time goes on. But the actual stages themselves, very impressive how big some of them could be, but you do have to bear in mind, we've got a big one here, 14 kilometers, yeah, there you go. We'll have studded snow tyres again. Again, as with most rally, of course, you can repair the car, as you will have to at some point, although by the looks of it, I mean, we're changing the brakes and we don't even need to. I did really well to keep the car intact through all that. Do I want to do the 35-minute? What is it? Do not in the next rally. You see, that'll count the next service station as well, I reckon, but if it doesn't, so you can either automatically repair or you can go through and select which parts you want. We'll not change the brakes and see if that helps. Maybe that'll make the game happier. So let's do the 14-mile or 14-kilometer stage, sorry, and you'll get to see one of the bigger stages in this game. Sorry if I'm reiterating, by the way, I'm having to slightly focus on driving the car. Then again, my first impressions of Need for Speed Heat was like 50 minutes, so first impressions videos are long, and this game does require a long one, because I've not even got into my main sort of talking about the issues, because overall it's actually been pretty, you know, pretty nice up to this point. Handling's better, the choices of car are better, although I guess for the official cars losing Citroen is quite a big deal, and the stages are pretty and can be long, which is good. Overall visually, I mean, you can see here, the game is quite pretty. Very pretty, you know, probably if you got this, obviously it's a bit hard for me to compare this to Rally 2.0 so much, considering I play Rally 2.0 on max settings on my PC, whereas this I'm obviously playing on my Xbox. The reason I'm doing that, by the way, there was a reason, I can't remember. Oh yeah, this isn't available on Steam, it's Epic Game Store. Not that I've got a big issue with the Epic Game Store, it's just I haven't installed the Epic Game Store and I couldn't be asked to set an account up on it, so that basically explains why I bought this on Xbox. Yeah, even on the original Xbox One, it's pretty. And that can cause some issues. This game does not run happily on a original Xbox One. WRC 9 will be the first WRC game to be cross-platform with the next generation. So this game is going to come out on PS5, and actually that's one of the reasons I bought it, because when I decide to eventually get an Xbox Series X, I've got the digital version of this, so it would just be a free upgrade straight to the Series X. And I would love to tell you what this game's like on Series X when I eventually buy one, so I may do that, I may not, we'll see. But running this game on the original Xbox One is not a fun experience. I've had instances where the frame rate has dropped to about 15 frames per second randomly on one of the whale stages, which was really pretty, which was a shame really, because it wasn't doing that before. It was sort of running at 30 and then it just decided to randomly start running at like 20 frames per second, which really killed any form of momentum I could get going in that stage. I've had instances of the worst one's probably the audio cutouts. It's mostly in Monte Carlo, I find. You'll hear the audio sort of get stuck on a car rev, and it will do that, and then about a minute later the game will just crash. That's happened to me more than a handful of times at this point. Yeah, the frame rate thing, that happens. You'll see graphical bugs all the time, you know, textures flickering in the distance, stuff like that. It's very clear they didn't quite optimize this game for the original Xbox One, which, you know, sure, the original Xbox One is 7 years old, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't want to make it run on the original Xbox One, don't release it on the original Xbox One, you know, make it a Series X game and hold it off for a bit. I don't know what it runs like on PS4, on an original PS4, but I would hazard a guess that it's much the same. As far as, you know, Xbox One S, Xbox One X, I don't have either of those consoles, so I can't really say much, and the same with PC, I can't really detail what the performance would be like in terms of that game, although I would say you'd probably need a pretty darn good PC to run this thing, because yeah, it is incredibly pretty at times. Sometimes, I mean, it's like here, you know, it's not massively special. I don't know what YouTube's going to do with the whole foliage thing, because occasionally I think it's the encoder on YouTube goes a bit weird. But yeah, you can see, very pretty, but of course, because it's very pretty and running on very old hardware, it does have big issues in terms of the performance, which is a bit of a shame. And that's just sort of a little... That's the one thing that annoys me most about this game, is the little bugs, stuff like that, you know, where the frame rate goes, or... There's been a few other things as well. I think the co-driver occasionally has a habit of stopping. In fact, if we want to go back to stages slightly, I do notice the co-driver's notes are slightly off sometimes. You know, they'll say it's a 6 right, and it sure as fuck is not a 6 right. There's a specific corner in Sardinia, I think it is. Or is it Portugal? It's either Sardinia or Portugal, one of those two. It's one of the maps that has the giant wind turbines on it. And there is a corner there which they say take flat out, and I don't care what car you're in, I don't care if you're in the Tomahawk thing from Gran Turismo, you ain't taking that corner flat out, buddy. It just ain't happening. So I don't know what some of these pace notes are. In terms of that, actually, I guess this is where we come to another sort of negative about this game. This game has... One of the things which I despise most about modern gaming, it has a roadmap. A roadmap to me is just, you should have worked harder on the game. Yes, I know COVID's a thing, but to be honest with you, this roadmap was probably going to exist anyway. So what is the roadmap for WRC 9? You can go check it out, but essentially what it consists of is the co-driver mode, which they did hype up before, where essentially it's like a co-op game where one person is a driver, one person is actually the co-driver. I'd love to see how that works. I'd love to play that with someone. I've been trying to convince Rhino to do that with me, because I think that'd be an absolute blast. And me as a co-driver, I mean, how can you not want that? But I don't quite know how that will work, but I was excited about that, and that's one of the reasons I bought this game. And then it turns out, nope, we're not adding that feature for another month. They're redesigning a fair few of the rallies. Again, I will give them the benefit of the doubt for Rally Latvia. That was not a thing they were planning, because that was not in the 2020 calendar, but they've had to do it now because it's a real event. Which is more than F1 2020, because I don't think they're adding any of the tracks that have been sort of COVID affected. But they're redoing Finland in the new sort of render engine, which is fine, but you should have done that before the game launched, Bucko. I'm sorry, you know, I appreciate the fact you've got all this cool rendering system now, but like, you should have done that before the game launched. I'm sorry, you know, I hate stuff like that, you know, oh, we're redoing this. It's like, oh, release a finished... I know it's bad and cliche to say, you know, all games should be finished, but it really should be. You know, especially if it's something you know you're going to redo. Why ship the game in the first place with a stage which you will wholeheartedly admit is not as good as some of the other stages, like Rally Japan or Rally Kenya, which I'm probably going to do like a single event at Rally Kenya, just to show that off, because I love Kenya. But yeah, it's a little bit disappointing in that regard. I hate roadmaps, I really do. They're the bane of my existence. In terms, if you're worrying about anything else, there's no other forms of microtransactions. There's a few DLC items, paid DLC items at the moment, but they're mostly related to getting the limited edition, which I got. The Corolla's a limited edition car. There's a special stage in Spain, which is related to that, and something else as well, which is like a pre-order or limited edition bonus part thing. So yeah, as far as other paid DLC, I don't think they've said anything about it, and historically in the past WRC games haven't really had paid DLC. What I will say though is the roadmap thing. This game has not had an update since it came out. I've had this game, did admittedly buy it about a week or two before it, or after it came out, but I haven't seen an update come through, which you would have expected by this point to fix some of these pretty niggling performance issues that are going on. Oh, we got a special stage. We'll do the special stage and then I'll go drive around Kenya, because I like Kenya. I'm not very good at Kenya, but I do like it a lot. So, yeah, there's another thing this game has, special stages, which are quite cool. You don't see those in Dirt Rally, you don't really see those in rally games that often in general. But, you know, you gotta respect the rally stages. These are sort of little circuits where there's like stunts and stuff going on. And of course, because it's a fully licensed rally game, you do compete against all the real-life drivers in WRC 2 and so on. which is quite cool. Although WRC 2 and 3, you'll notice, has a bit of a weird thing. They go to all 15 rallies, but each team essentially will contract for between 8 and 7 rallies, and essentially when you're picking the contract you have to pick what rallies you're going to show up for. By the time you get to mainline WRC, you're agreeing to show up to every single rally. Now admittedly, if you want to get a bit technical, in terms of the car I've ended up at, this is the can't pronounce his name, Latvala, Finnish driver. This is actually his team that he basically crowdfunds, kind of. You know, he bought a privateered Toyota. I think they're getting some slight support from Gazoo Racing, but essentially Gazoo Racing couldn't give him a drive, and neither could M Sport, so he's sort of made his own team and he's crowdfunding his way through the season. But of course, you know, they have to give this car the benefit of the doubt and just sort of run it. Apparently damage the brakes and suspension and that. Actually, that's a point I can bring up. Damage system. I think the damage system in this game is a bit too harsh. I get it. Rally is supposed to be punishing, and it's supposed to punish every single mistake, you know? You could break the car, and you do get mechanical breakdowns in this, where you can't continue, and the game will tell you that. But I think some of the wear and tear damage is a little bit ridiculous, especially considering a lot of it is unavoidable through, say, jumps and stuff like that. You can't really avoid damaging the car through there. I get it, real life it would, but even with the damage on medium, you know, I've had times where the suspension has fully collapsed after about 3 runs, and that's only, you know, knocking a rock a couple of times. Again, I get it needs to be punishing, but I think it's a bit too punishing at times, and that can really put you off. It almost makes you want to put it to visual damage only, and if you put it to visual damage only, I mean, what's really the point of it all? Do I want to repair this? Can I get away with... See, this is what I quite like about Rally. You sort of have to choose what bits you want to change. We won't change the brakes, you know, that's fine. Engine, we'll give boot. Everything else we could probably put to about 100 or so. Make sure the turbo's running fine, steering's fine, everything else I don't really care about. I don't know what our original problem was then. No, we'll go with that. Apparently we spent 22 minutes on repairs, so maybe it is counting that first one. Anyways, we'll get out of here. Because that is enough of the career mode showed off. I shall show off one of the legend cars now. But hopefully you got a little bit of my complaints in there. There's issues with bugs, which, yeah, really, I know they didn't sound like much and I didn't mention them for very long. My mind's gone blank because I swear there's more than just the noise and then the shut off of the game, and also the frame rate going a bit mental. There's a few other bugs. I did mention my frustrations with the career mode, the fact that you can't essentially pick what you want to drive for without having to basically be railroaded down a route you don't want to go down, which I find is pretty bollocks. Why am I lost right now? Oh yeah, quick play, that's what I was looking for. So we'll do a spot at Rally Kenya. As you can see, here's all the routes. How many is there for this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I thought there was 10 routes. Apparently there's only 7. That's even worse. I might have to edit that in thingy. But yeah, no, the new rallies do look spectacular. Rally Japan is incredibly frustrating, but it's incredibly pretty. We'll do this Sayaibi. Sure, why not? Should we drive? Let's drive the Corolla. You know, make this an old Toyota video, I guess. But hopefully I've done a decent job of explaining some of my issues. Oh, that's another thing as well. There's a few other parts of this game where they really don't have enough polish. Again, you know, flickering textures occasionally. And also this text box at the bottom, you'll see it says welcome to WRC 9. Occasionally you'll see like tips for the game pop up and there's just commas in weird places. I get annoyed by that sort of stuff. I know I'm a dyslexic and I occasionally don't write things correctly, but stuff like that can really irritate me occasionally, and it certainly does in the case of this game. Apparently there's a ghost car or something. We are not going to beat a good stage, because again I'm pretty awful at this stage. But yeah, Rally Kenya, I love Kenya. as a rally. I loved it in the original WRC game, and definitely do here. I think I was in the Zara when I last did this. But as you can see, Kenya is sort of very sandy, and again, it looks great, you know, it looks exactly like you'd expect it to. It's a massive shame they couldn't run Kenya this year, because I'd love to have seen how, because when they used to run Kenya, you know, they had snorkels and bash guards on the cars. I would have loved to have seen what the actual real WRC cars would have looked like, especially with all the fancy aero packages and stuff they have on these days. You know, I doubt they would have, yeah, had those. Oh, another thing I should mention, cameras in this game. I'm actually going to give this a positive, so if we just pause here. Cameras are actually fully adjustable, which I really like in terms of this game. Also, you can see you can adjust the difficulty. I don't know why you can do that on the fly. Also, there's broken down cars on the roadside now, which is cool. There's a few little, you know, new things they've added to this game. But cameras, you can actually fully adjust them, which is really cool. So, for example, this fixed chase camera, you know, if we want it a bit higher up. And, you know, you can even extend that to the cockpit, which is really cool. You can actually configure these, because usually in games I hate, you know, when you have cockpit modes like that, where it's too far zoomed in, or it's too far zoomed out, or the camera is, you know, up here. Or in the case of Forza, you know, occasionally you'll have, like, camera bugs, where the camera's not moved around. I love it when games give you the option to move cameras around, and the best bit is that is entirely... Each car has different modes, you know, you don't, it's not just all for one setting. You know, if you find in the Ford Fiesta you need a slightly higher hood cam, you can do that. And it's brilliant. I really like that feature. It's really, really clever. Yeah, how you can do that. I am very slightly ahead on my fastest time, although taking these jumps is not a good idea. But yeah, the damage system, as I was saying before, a little bit too harsh, I find. Especially on some stages like Monte Carlo and stuff. Even on medium, you know, it'll completely wipe your car out, which I don't think is very fair. It seems a lot more vicious than it did in WRC 8. I don't know if that was a thing to go more towards realism, because, you know, realistically cars should be more beat up than that. Oop. God. I was like how I was like trying to go for the interior view to like show it off there. And yeah, it's really horrible and old, and that's definitely my ghost car, because that's definitely something I'd do. But yeah, lots of different camera angles, and of course you can adjust them, which is pretty cool. I do find myself switching between cameras a lot. I don't usually use third person for rally games, but I found it quite comfortable in the case of this game. Oof, that is a tight little corner there. But yeah, overall, it's, the way I would describe this game is it is a great game wrapped in loads of little niggles. I definitely did get burnt with this game with the whole career mode. If you don't know what happened there, as I tried to explain earlier, essentially it tries to railroad you into signing for a manufacturer. I decided, you know, I wanted to see what all my options were at the end of the season, and it turns out by the end of the season I had literally no options other than to sign back with my WRC 2 team, or go backwards and go to WRC 3, which seemed really weird. So, really don't like that. I much preferred the old system. You know, it should just be as soon as you come out of WRC 2, you get to pick what car you want to go for. I appreciate they're trying to do something with this whole manufacturer rewards, and, you know, Hyundai's interested in you and this is interested in you and that, but I don't really get that. Some of the team building as well, I find, is a little bit sort of not really there. You know, you'd figure if you're going to have like a team building style game where, you know, you have to manage your team's fatigue and all the rest of it, they may as well just go the whole hog and give you like money so you can buy cars and essentially you become a new team in WRC and you choose what car you want to buy and all the rest of it. But they don't go down that route, unlike say an F1 2020 or something would. So yeah, comparing it to F1 2020 is pretty apt, because that game also tried to do a lot of things with the sort of team building career mode and so on. Apparently did really well there. We'll do another rally, because why not? We'll, I guess we'll show off Japan. Germany I hate. I'm going to show off Japan, even though I can't stand tarmac rallies. I am awful at tarmac rally. Yeah, there you go. There's a 22-kilometer terrorizer of a stage right there. We'll go with the Wagatui. I think that's what that's called. Should we drive another Legends car? Let's drive the Zara, because why not? But yeah, Japan's really pretty as well. There's a lot of really pretty stages in this game. But yeah, overall, it's just a game where it's just mired in a bunch of little annoyances with the whole frame rate and so on. And it doesn't sound like much, but that can really throw you off, especially if you're getting a good run in a rally. And the frame rate just starts bugging out, or, you know, you get distracted by textures flickering. There's also a few weird... Again, I could swear there's more I could bring up here, but there's just... My mind's going entirely blank for some reason, so I do apologise for that. I'll probably finish this video and there'll be like a bunch of other things I wish I would have mentioned during this, but yeah. Oh, another slight annoyance. I find on controller this... The steering wheel looks way too rigid with the way he moves it around. Usually I find myself driving from this camera a lot more than driving from that camera. Oh, that was another thing. Occasionally the physics can go a bit weird. If you subscribe to my second channel, you'll probably noticed a couple of videos with WRC 9 as a video game as the title. Yeah, the physics can go a bit wonky on this game occasionally. You'll like hit a barrier wrong and be ejected 1,000 foot into the air. I think that makes it clear they're probably using a new physics engine for this game, as they have mentioned, even though it does feel so similar to WRC 8, but... yeah, that can have issues. Again, check out those videos out, TRE Extras if you want. I might link one down below in the description of a Skoda flying space. I think I've got another one lined up somewhere, but yeah, stuff like that certainly does happen, so there's a few physics issues there, but actual driving is not really a problem. It's just a case of like when you hit things or like bounce off things, occasionally very weird physicky things can happen, so that is not so good. But yeah, as you can see, I mean, that's a lot of foliage, but yeah, the game sure will make you know. Wales has really pretty stages as well. I don't think they've rebuilt Wales. I'm feeling certain it's still the same Wales from WRC 8, but yeah, that has some really pretty stages as well. But these tarmac rallies, I can't stand. Japan's not as bad as Germany. Germany, I literally crash and try and like get my car written off on purpose to get out of driving Germany because it's just too tight and twisty. Germany and Japan probably much better on a steering wheel. On controller it feels a bit too sensitive on the tarmac for my liking personally, especially in like rear-wheel drive cars. I had to drive one of the Japanese stages in a Ford Escort and it was absolutely abysmal, and now I drove it in a Fiesta WRC and it wasn't too bad, so yeah, something worth bearing in mind there. But overall, it's a good game. Again, if you've got an Xbox, if you've got a Xbox One X or a PC with good graphics abilities, this is probably a much better game. I don't doubt it's going to be made better. The developer does seem to care about this game, but there is just a few little niggles, and the problem is I don't know how much longer the developer's going to care about it, because of course it's already announced that Codemasters are going to be picking... I can't remember what year it is. It's a fair whiles off yet, but they're still picking these games up eventually. So that's some good news, I guess, if you sort of... Hopefully they'll go more the realism route and don't piss about and try and make dirt-free WRC 11, 12, 13, whatever they get. Okay, cool. But overall, yeah, it's a good game. Is it worth buying? If you've got a PC or a One X, yeah. If you're on a standard Xbox, I would wait for the price to drop. I think I paid 50 something for the limited bonus edition, whatever. Don't pay that. You know, get this when it's 20, 30 quid. Or alternatively, you just wait a year and it'll be on Games with Gold, as the previous WRC games apparently have been. So that's something you can do as well. But if you like WRC 8, you'll probably like WRC 9. Just be prepared for the fact that you are going to have to go through the career mode again, and it does still have a few of the annoyances. Although, thankfully, the difficulty in the fact you can change it between rallies, and this sort of the damage model as well, you can change between rallies. That's a really good thing. I really applaud them for doing that. They're obviously listening to criticism, and again, I don't think this is abandonware as a game, but there's definitely some issues that do need ironing out, so... yeah, that's pretty much all I think I've got to say on the matter. If you've got any other questions, do leave them down below in the comment section, and I will be sure to address them. I'll try to. But I think I've mentioned pretty much everything I'll need to know, or need to mention. But yeah, good game, wrapped in some issues, and also restricted by some of the resource limitations that currently exist in this sort of console generation as we wait for the next generation to come along, and hopefully that should alleviate some of this. But yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks for listening to what probably turned into a 50-minute ramble of nothingness, but would you expect anything more? Yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.
Where my hopes and dreams are going, I'll only beg. Up in a wall that you are not part of. Eyes on the slit of your father with love.